For years, the New York Giants have existed in the background of the NFL. Not feared, not hated, not even taken seriously. They weren't the team you circled on the schedule anymore. They were the team you expected to fix your problems. A confidence boost, a get-right game, a franchise stuck somewhere between rebuilding and restarting, constantly searching for an identity that never seemed to stick. And that's the most dangerous place a historic organization can fall. Not rock bottom, but irrelevance. Because the Giants were never supposed to feel ordinary. This is a franchise built on moments that shook the league. But over the past decade, that feeling disappeared. Seasons blurred together, coaches came and went, quarterbacks rotated. Hope showed up every September and quietly packed its bags by November. Around the league, people stopped asking when the Giants would be back. They started assuming they wouldn't. And that's exactly why what's happening right now feels different. Because the NFL still thinks this is the same team. It isn't. The shift began the moment the organization handed the keys to John Harbaugh. For nearly 2 decades, Harbaugh built one of the most stable cultures in professional football. His teams weren't always the flashiest, but they were always prepared, always physical, always disciplined. His reputation wasn't built on hype, it was built on consistency, accountability, and winning games that came down to willpower instead of talent rankings. And when he arrived in New York, he didn't promise a miracle, he promised structure. That sounds boring until you realize structure has been exactly what the Giants have lacked for years. Harbaugh didn't walk into the building trying to reinvent football. He walked in trying to restore belief, starting with something simple: identity before talent. Because the truth about struggling franchises is this: they usually aren't just missing players, they're missing direction. Players don't know what the team wants to be. Coaches adjust philosophies yearly. Schemes change faster than rosters can develop. Everything feels temporary. Harbaugh's first message reportedly wasn't about playoffs or championships. It was about standards, practice tempo, physicality, accountability, roles earned, not handed out. And slowly something unfamiliar started creeping back into the locker room. Expectation, not hope, not optimism, expectation. But culture alone doesn't change the NFL. You still need players who embody it, players who make a philosophy real on Sundays. And that's where this new Giants era gets interesting, because their identity isn't being built around established superstars. It's being built around belief in players the rest of the league still isn't sure about. At quarterback, that belief centers on Jackson Dart. Dart doesn't arrive with universal certainty. He isn't the consensus savior prospect everyone agreed would dominate immediately. His path has always felt slightly chaotic. Flashes of brilliance mixed with questions, confidence paired with risk-taking that sometimes cross the line. And that's exactly why this situation matters. Harbaugh has never needed perfection at quarterback. What he's always valued is resilience, players who respond to adversity instead of shrinking from it. Dart plays like someone who refuses to be cautious. He attacks throws, extends plays, plays with visible emotion. Sometimes that leads to mistakes. Sometimes it leads to moments that feel impossible. But under Harbaugh, the goal isn't to erase Dart's aggressiveness. It's to weaponize it. Because for the first time in years, the Giants aren't asking their quarterback to carry chaos. They're asking him to operate inside structure, strong defense, physical run game, controlled tempo, and a coaching staff built around situational football. That changes everything for a young quarterback. Instead of forcing hero ball, Dart can grow into leadership naturally. Instead of chasing games, he can manage them. Instead of being the entire offense, he can become the engine that keeps it moving. And if there's one thing Harbaugh understands, it's how confidence compounds when a young quarterback starts winning early. But the real tone of this team might not come from the quarterback position at all. It might come from the backfield, because Cam Scatabo is back there. He runs like someone trying to prove something every single carry. There's a violence to his game that immediately stands out. Not recklessness, intention. Every run feels personal. Every broken tackle feels like a statement. He doesn't glide past defenders, he drags them forward, and that matters more than people realize. For years, the Giants have lacked an offensive identity opponents feared. Games felt reactive instead of imposing. Defenses dictated terms. Scatabo represents the opposite philosophy. Run at people, wear them down, turn 4-yard gains into emotional victories. Make defenders hesitate late in games because they're tired of tackling. That's Harbaugh football. And suddenly the roster construction starts to make sense. A quarterback with competitive fire, a running back who sets a physical tone, a coach whose entire career has been built on winning ugly before winning big. The NFL may look at this roster and see uncertainty. Harbaugh looks at it and sees moldability, because culture changes don't happen through speeches. They happen through repetition, through 100 small moments that redefine what players expect from themselves. A 3rd and short conversion that used to fail now succeeds. A late-game drive that used to collapse now finishes. A defense that used to blend finally refuses to break. And slowly, perception lags behind reality. That's where dangerous teams are born. Right now, most of the league still views the Giants as a rebuilding project. Analysts talk about patience, development timelines, growing pains. But inside the building, the conversation is different. This isn't being framed as a long rebuild. It's being framed as a reset. Harbaugh understands something many coaches don't. Momentum in the NFL can arrive faster than anyone expects. One disciplined offseason, one young quarterback gaining confidence, one physical identity clicking into place, and suddenly close losses become wins. And wins change everything. Confidence spreads, players play faster, mistakes shrink, opponents stop overlooking you, the schedule stops feeling forgiving, and maybe the biggest reason the NFL isn't ready for this version of the Giants is simple. Nobody knows what they're preparing for yet. They don't know what Dart looks like inside a structured, confident offense. They don't know how exhausting 4 quarters of Scatabo's running style will feel. They don't know how quickly Harbaugh can turn instability into belief, because we've seen this story before across the league. A respected coach arrives, expectations stay low, early wins get dismissed as flukes. Then, suddenly it's November, and nobody wants to play that team anymore. Not because they're perfect, because they're relentless. And that word might define this Giants team better than anything else. For the first time in years, the Giants aren't searching for who they are. They know. An identity strong enough to survive adversity. And once that clicks, once players stop hoping and start expecting, the rest of the league usually realizes too late. Because the NFL rarely fears teams coming off losing seasons. It fears teams that suddenly know exactly who they are. And heading into this season, the New York Giants finally do, which means the real question isn't whether they'll improve. It's whether the league will recognize what's happening before it's already too late. That moment is coming, because what John Harbaugh has historically done better than almost anyone in football is build teams that grow stronger as the season goes on. September teams learn systems. October teams build confidence. But Harbaugh teams, they become problems in November. And that timeline matters for this Giants roster more than people realize. Early in the season, the conversation around the Giants will probably sound familiar. Growing pains, rookie mistakes, a young quarterback adjusting to NFL speed, close games that could go either way. And that's exactly when most people will miss what's exactly forming. Because development under structure doesn't look explosive at first, it looks controlled. For Jackson Dart, that control might be the most important change of his career. Instead of chasing highlight plays, Dart can begin stacking small victories. And confidence in the NFL builds exactly that way. One completed drive becomes 2. One comeback becomes expectation instead of surprise. And suddenly, the same risk-taking mentality that once created inconsistency starts producing controlled aggression. Because confidence changes how quarterbacks see the field. Windows feel larger, pressure feels slower, decisions arrive quicker. The league often talks about the game slowing down for young quarterbacks. But what they really mean is belief catching up to ability. And if Dart reaches that point midway through the season, everything about this offense changes. Defenses can no longer crowd the line. They can't assume conservative play calling. They can't treat the Giants as predictable, which leads directly to the player who might quietly shape the identity of this entire team, Cam Scatabo. There's something psychologically exhausting about playing against a physical running back for 4 quarters. Not just the yards, the collisions. Defenders know what's coming and still struggle to stop it. Scatabo's role isn't just production, it's punishment. Harbaugh understands that physical football doesn't just move chains, it controls emotion. When an offense dictates tempo through toughness, defenses begin reacting instead of attacking. And once defenses start reacting, play action opens, passing lanes widen, young quarterbacks gain easier reads. That's how systems elevate players. The Giants aren't trying to build an offense dependent on perfection. They're building one dependent on pressure. And that style travels well. Cold weather games, road environments, late season matchups where finesse offenses struggle to maintain rhythm. Suddenly, conditions that once felt like disadvantages begin favoring New York. But the transformation isn't just offensive. Harbaugh's philosophy has always tied offense and defense together through complementary football. Long drives protect defenses. Field position matters. Special teams become weapons instead of afterthoughts. Games shrink. Possessions matter more. And when games tighten, disciplined teams gain an edge. That's historically where rebuilding teams fail. The small details that separate competitive teams from winning ones. Harbaugh's arrival changes this, and slowly something begins happening around the league. Opponents stop describing the Giants as young. They start describing them as annoying, hard to play against, physical, disciplined. A team that refuses to beat itself. That reputation shift is everything, because once a team becomes mentally exhausting to face, talent gaps shrink. Games stay close longer. Pressure flips onto opponents expected to win comfortably. And that's when upsets start happening. The locker room begins believing something bigger is possible, and belief is contagious. Momentum builds quietly until suddenly it isn't quiet anymore. By the back half of the season, the Giants won't look like a rebuilding team. They'll look like a team nobody wants to see late in the year. And that's when the league realizes why hiring Harbaugh mattered so much. He doesn't just improve teams, he stabilizes them. Stability allows development, not perfect games, winning games. And those are different things entirely, because greatness in the NFL rarely begins with dominance. It begins with resilience. A quarterback bouncing back after interceptions, an offense finishing drives instead of settling for field goals, a team responding to adversity without panic. And once identity locks in, progress accelerates. By December, opponents preparing for New York won't be studying a rebuilding roster. They'll be preparing for a philosophy, run-heavy aggression, controlled passing, situational discipline, a team comfortable winning games that feel uncomfortable. That's when the narrative flips completely. The same analysts who predicted a long rebuild start asking different questions. How did this turnaround happen so quickly? The answer will feel obvious in hindsight. Culture arrived before expectations did. Harbaugh didn't try to create overnight fireworks. He built habits strong enough to survive adversity. And when adversity inevitably came, the team didn't collapse. It adapted. And adaptation is the first sign of a dangerous team. Because once players trust the system, fear disappears. Games stop feeling overwhelming. Pressure becomes opportunity. The Giants begin playing freer and ironically more disciplined at the same time. That combination is rare, and it's usually when surprise teams make their leap. Not because they suddenly gain talent, but because their talent finally aligned with purpose.